I'm sitting here with Christine Payne-Towler. We're going to talk about her book called The Foundations of the Esoteric Traditions. I'm very excited, Christine, to be able to sit here and go with you potentially through all these chapters. And I see that, is there a deck that goes with this book at all?
Well, yeah. I actually put this book together. It was the appendix of the volume I first wrote for the Tarot of the Holy Light.
Oh.
So, I just, things that I wanted to talk about, but they weren't completely operational on the deck, I would put aside and think, okay, here's my Kabbalah appendix, here's my astrology appendix, here's my magic appendix, and eventually, when we went to make up the book for Tarot of the Holy Light, Michael said to me, I'm sorry, but I'm not putting those inside of this. This is already too many pages. You got to do another book. So that's what this is, the appendix to the working manual on Tarot of the Holy Light.
And Michael is like the owner of your publishing company, or?
Well, we own it together. Michael is the artist and editor. He made the illustrations for the Tarot of the Holy Light to my design. And then he also did all the colorations. These are collages from the alchemical works of the 1700s, which he found in black and white and cut and pasted, all this and that ways, until when he got the full deck made, then he went back around and colored it all up. So
that's amazing. This is a 250-page book, so you mean to tell me that you included it as an index in your original book?
As I was writing it, I always intended it to be in the back matter.
Wow, 200 pages. That's amazing. Have you gotten much feedback on this book? I'm not sure. I haven't heard about it at all.
Yeah, it's kind of a best-kept secret. I think it's a little intimidating, so people who are ready to go into the deep water are happy by it. I get really nice mail from people. It has good reviews, but you can see from the numbers that, people are feeling, it sells about half as often as the book for Tarot of the Holy Light. So that just tells you some people are happy to stay in the operational side, and other people just can't stand it. They've got to go into the deep end of the pool and find out why would she do it this way.
So you would say this is a theory of the actual Tarot of the Holy Light?
Well, it's the magical context into which Tarot was sown like a seed. And so, because it grew up in this magical context, this historical matrix, then it partakes of all these different already existing streams of thought, philosophies, and spiritual practices. All those are under the belt of the tarot makers when they put the tarot together. So you can say, oh, none of those people knew about previous generations, but I don't think that's true at all. I think we see all kinds of continuity from antiquity across early Christianity and then into the different stages of history. We may not have every historical event timed correctly. We may not fully understand the timeline because I think there's holes and I think there's things that are missing. But I think it's only wise because Tarot is a cumulative document that has gathered strength and gathered symbolism, gathered ideas over 600 years now, that we have to look at it as a collage, as something that's being handed on and embellished and handed on and embellished and then sometimes edited and started over. It's had a checkered history. But in the course of Tarot evolving, all these really interesting philosophical dialogues happened, like the Copernican rebellion, the Copernican revolution. The starting of the...
it was a rebellion, too.
It was. It definitely upset people for 100 years and put them at each other's throats. But there's also the founding of the Royal Society of London was another major bifurcation point. So we have certain things that were going on in the idea body of Europe that sprouted these different manifestations. And as these dialogues moved through the collective consciousness, little clues about them showed up in the imagery of the tarot. So, the reason why there would be another deck and another deck over the centuries is because as this dialogue evolved, it got reflected into the details of the cards so that people could almost, show without saying what their belief systems were. So you didn't have to put it in so many words and be subject to the Catholic censor, for example. You could just bury it in art, and the people who knew what they were looking at would see it. Things like that. This is how esotericism is transmitted during times when it's not allowed to stick its neck up above water.
Like you did with the energy body and clairvoyance kind of conversation that you start the book with?
Yeah, I'm saying, those things were left out of the academic world for a very long time. They were going on around with everybody, but they were considered, part of folk tradition, and it wasn't considered to be official learning where it was worthwhile to do the studies or to open departments on those topics. So they just went begging. The academic situation said, nope, we're staying with the known arts and sciences. We're not adding anything from the soft tech of psychology or spirituality. And so those things were really chased out of the academic matrix until fairly recently, last 150 years or so.
That's amazing. Yeah, I noticed you used some pretty large terms. One is the multidimensional esoteric worldview in recombinant form. And I think I'm a pretty intelligent person, but I could not crack that almond, that pistachio open. So I was wondering, can you explain to us what this words mean?
Yeah, let's take it one word at a time, and then we'll see if we can get a group meaning out of it.
Okay.
So the very first word was multidimensional, right?
Yes.
So then I'm talking, even on the face of the tarot, you see Kabbalistic implications, you see astrological implications, you see, number theology, you see these different ancient philosophical discussions going on with the sacred geometry, the inside story on the numbers. And you see Hebrew letters, which have such giant bodies of correspondences associated with them. So, I'm not the first one to say this, that the tarot is the flashcards of the mysteries. It is a place where multiple different esoteric models are coded together, and they're coded by the content that they have in common, which is sacred geometry and the internal dynamics of number. So number is the first oldest content of the tarot, and then on top of that they lay the four elements. On top of that they lay the zodiac and the 7 visible planets, and there you have your meaning matrix. All these different things are sort of multiplied by each other when you shuffle them together, and then you lay them out into an equation. So they're literally the multidimensionality of that phrase that you quoted has to do with bringing multiple esoteric arts together on the same set of flashcards so that you see how one thing is connected to another.
Oh, because I thought, I don't know if anybody else thought this, but I thought multidimensional meant like we're talking Marvel universe and different dimensions of existence.
Well, yes, we are.
Multidisciplinaries.
Well, we are talking multiple dimensions of existence because each of these disciplines cuts through the field of consciousness from a different direction. Right? So if you study Kabbalah long enough, you're going to walk through the world looking at everything with Kabbalistic categories, and then everything that you see is going to affirm what you learned from Kabbalah, and suddenly the world opens to you that way. But if you then go and study alchemy and spend a few years walking around using the vocabulary of alchemy, then suddenly the very same world starts to fall apart into different sections and show you the alchemical universe. Or then you step over and you put alchemy down and you step into astrology and you say, okay, well, let me use the astrological language and take it out into the world and see what it's showing me. And it's it's dividing the world again by another set of categories that you didn't have in the other disciplines. And so it's like a kaleidoscope that keeps opening, or like an Alex Gray painting where everything's moving and traveling and showing you as it's coming and going how it's morphing. The mind of an esotericist is wheels within wheels. And you're learning how to, if you turn one wheel here, that turns another wheel there and a third wheel there, and suddenly the meaning of the entire assemblage adjusts. So an esotericist has to be able to track multiple arts at once. So it is psychedelic, it is multidimensional in practice, in the life, in the psyche of the practitioner, because you have these multiple vocabularies building your thoughts for you. You have to put yourself into it. This is not something that a dilettante experiences. This is not somebody who's just, doing an overview swiftly to extract a few points, but somebody who actually wants to assemble the model of Kabbalah within their own energy body, and then assemble the alchemical vessel within their own energy body, then assemble the zodiac and all the moving planets within their own energy body. That has consequences for your experience in life. And these languages are just as complicated and have just as intricate a syntax as any spoken language. These are worldviews that are as complete as any other that you might go looking for. So that's what I mean by multidimensional. You are psychedelically swinging from limb to limb in the jungle of esotericism.
Okay, so multidimensional esoteric worldview. I think we got what is a recombinant form?
Well, the tarot cards are what bring the recombinant form.
What does that even mean? Recombinant? Like
it means
they keep combining?
It comes apart and goes back together, and comes apart and goes back together in constantly new patterns, like a kaleidoscope, but they're all fractally connected, so that, again, you move a tiny thing and big things move out in the cosmos, or you move the big things and it penetrates down to the tiny things because they're all connected through the sacred geometry. It's a fractal universe. It's a universe of interpenetrating fields that, as they ramify into each other, they densify into matter, and at any point along the line, they're going through this transformative, alchemical, recombinant, elementally shape-shifting process, because consciousness itself is forever shape-shifting. I mean, if you're lucky, if you're using your consciousness as opposed to just sliding along, not really wanting to wake up and ask any hard questions. I'm reminded of the Grail stories, where at the root of the action of when you're following the leadings of spirit correctly, you're not supposed to just witness things like a dumb animal and let them happen. You're supposed to ask questions. You're supposed to say, what's going on here? What's wrong? Why is the land sickening? What's happened to the king? Who's in charge here? And if you can't ask the hard questions, then you can't help the situation improve itself or rise up out of the problem. We have to challenge ourselves to see past the stuck place we're in right now, so that we can, see around all sides of our dilemma and lift ourselves out of it. What do they say? You can't solve a problem from the same plane as you created the problem. You have to pop out and then look at it from some other point of view, and then you finally see the thing that you weren't seeing when you were stuck in the old evaluation. So that's part of what all these great vocabularies are for, is they challenge you to take your particular experience and measure it by this discipline, and see what happens to your treasured story of yourself when you analyze that story by the parameters of this discipline. And even though it's hard work, it's just as hard as psychotherapy, and you often don't even have anybody to do it with, but a bunch of books, or your tarot deck, sitting up late at night going, why do I feel like this? Why am I going through this? But the cards will guide you, because they will lead you back to these noble taxonomies of ideas where you can rethink yourself. You don't have to have the shame and blame of having some other human telling you what to think and do. You could be having a conversation with the techniques themselves that will assist you through their vocabulary and through their method of analysis for to getting unstrung from the dilemma as you used to frame it, so that you can restring the dilemma as an opportunity or as a channel towards getting where you need to go. I mean, there's no reason why we can't redefine our situation. If we can have better thought forms, we might be able to make better sense of ourselves.
And wow, that's so awesome. So recombinant is kind of the same thing. Like, we become somebody new based on going through an experience that we haven't gone through before, and now we know how to have different kinds of experiences.
Well, especially because people think that the shape that they find themselves in is the only shape they could ever be in. People don't realize I am an assemblage of many different experiences and beliefs, and if I don't like how it feels right now, I can disassemble it and then reassemble it. And it's all still your same pieces. Nobody's asking you to throw yourself out. We're saying take the pieces apart and see if they click together in a different order. And if they do they make better sense, or are you more comfortable, or are you better able to navigate in the world if you make a different pattern out of these same pieces? Because it's not about making you or anybody wrong. It's about putting ourselves back after being mishandled by a culture that doesn't really care about the inner life. We're all deeply mishandled, so we have to care about the inner life ourselves. And these esoteric disciplines give us vocabulary for that and ideas about how to go about it.
And that's basically my next question. You mentioned von Stuckrad's book. Why was that so important to you?
I went through a period where I thought I was going to go off to school and get a PhD in Western esotericism. I figured I could probably do that after my family life was over and I was set loose into a new epoch in my life. But instead I got together with Michael Dowers and we ran off here to the Puget Island and made the Tarot of the Holy Light, and I took my studies by myself instead of worrying about going through school and getting evaluated. So I gathered in all the different textbooks that were available at the time for the new Western esotericism programs that had just started in Europe and America at the year 2000. So there's just this brand new discipline in the educational field where they were finally starting to take on the subjective experience of being a self and the work of spiritual growth if you were going to do something with yourself, So separate from psychology, which is only 100, 150 years old, we've had thousands of years of people working on themselves using all these different paradigms as a way to build up, their inner lives so that they could do what they needed to do, be what they needed to be in this world. So, von Stuckrad took the analysis of Western esotericism. There were a number of scholars who, over the late 1990s, sat down and just wrestled it out amongst themselves. What do you have to have in a piece of literature or a piece of art in order for it to qualify to come into the lexicon of Western esotericism? And they set out 6 criteria, 4 of which were immutable and had to be present, and 2 of which might or might not be present. And so that work, which was really rigorous and had them at loggerheads for a long time, is the seedbed out of which 5 or 6 textbooks came on Western esotericism, and von Stuckrad's is one. It's called Western Esotericism, A Brief History of Secret Knowledge, and his name is Koku, K-O-C-K-U, von Stuckrad, S-T-U-C-K-R-A-D. An excellent book, and he just basically took those 6 criteria of Western esotericism and marched forward through different eras. and talked about, okay, how do we find it here? How do we find it there? So
Mm-hmm.
all these textbooks are worthy and wonderful, and I would suggest they're probably more and more coming out. But I was enjoying this second generation or third generation of professors who had been duking it out for our sake to develop this new paradigm, and then each went off to different universities to build their own programs. So von Stuckrad is one of those pioneers. And he just took the bull by the horns. Everybody took a different path. You see Jocelyn Godwin's textbook from the same era, or you see Hannah Graf's textbook. They've each taken their own angle on it, and so it's part of like what I was saying earlier, that you come into the matrix of esotericism, and one person cuts a plane through it this direction, another person cuts a plane through it this other direction, and eventually with everybody together, you can get the whole arena lit up. But no one person is going to have all of everything, in perfect focus. So I just was using all these guys to help me focus on my own, what I was interested in and what I wanted to know about, and especially how it might all apply to Tarot. So von Stuckrad made a really nice analysis of those necessary qualities that have to be there for Western esotericism, for something to fit into the concept of Western esotericism. And of course, I wouldn't have bothered if they hadn't already admitted that Tarot is an obvious tool in the transmission of the model. So, I wouldn't be working so hard to make sure that all the academic jot and tittle was collected up, except that they together had already wrestled it out that Tarot had to be there. So you find in the history of, what is it, the big blue volume, History of Gnosis and Western Esotericism, which is also produced by much of these same people, a giant collection of articles on all of the important people through the transmission in the West. And you find all of our Lions of Tarot in there too. One of the best articles I've seen on Atella is in there. Most objective, least full of BS. A lot of data collected all in one place. All kinds of people that you wouldn't think, because we're used to the idea that universities don't study those guys. But when these departments of Western esotericism started emerging, then they took it upon themselves to fill the gap. And there's actually, Hannah Graf wrote a whole book called Esotericism and the Academy on the struggles of trying to get Western esotericism into the college curriculum. So that's also been historically laid out for us now, that we can understand why it was such a struggle and the stages they went through in order to nail this thing down, so that we could actually build an academic framework in it and not keep leaving it begging.
Now, this sounds like Foundations of Esotericism. This doesn't sound like the title of the chapter, which is Clairvoyance and Apprehending the Cosmic Body. So do you talk about these topics more through the book? I mean, I know we have your Patreon material, and is this where you get a lot of your Patreon material from? Or I don't understand how you're able to sit here with such an encyclopedic knowledge of all this stuff and in the same breath talk about energy bodies and clairvoyance.
Oh, well, okay. Every person who wants to become a student, behind their desire to know something is usually the desire to untangle themselves, right? Any topic that a person is going to get deeply into, it's because they have a personal interest. So I personally was born madly and inconveniently psychic, or the combination of this body and this society and these times set me up to partake in the psychedelic revolution of the West Coast without needing to be all dipped in drugs all the time, because I'm already in a synesthetic and somewhat psychedelic universe with this particular nervous system. So I spent a lot of my early years, and I'm talking through my 30s and 40s even, when I was long already practiced in astrology and tarot, looking for vocabulary that would match my experience. Mm-hmm. So all my academic work has been the search for vocabulary. And this is why the first chapter of Foundations goes into this issue of nominalism, which is so dry and so boring, it seems, but it gets to the heart of what we believe about our words that we use. And if you, depending upon what you believe words are and what you think they're doing, are they magical spells that can reach out and touch the essence of something? Or are they just labels that you can rip them off and stick them on something else and make them mean whatever you want? Are they living entities with intelligence in them, built for purpose? Or are they just random groups of sounds, the animal mouth noises that our little type of creature likes to make? It's all those things depending upon who you talk to. But when you go back to the ancient creation myths, they all say something to the equivalent of, in the beginning was the Word, or first Buddha breathed in, and then Buddha breathed out, and there was a world. There's something about the element air, the vocalization of sound, the pulling together of meaningful sound to speak forth a creation. This is at the root of all of our creation myths. It's this idea that at a certain point the gods or whoever it was filled up with a pregnant creativity and uttered forth what became reality. So because that's such a consistent metaphor, the word is a huge balloon of meaning with a million ideas in it from how many different civilizations have thought of the word or the breath, the thought that comes forth as sound, as a creative impulse, literally the source of all the manifestations that we see here. So with that, I'm looking through the word for the word, in order to find the words that will explain to me what I'm living. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how this happens for other people, but I sure know how it happened for me, because I had psychology parents and we were not looking at the same world. I could understand psychology. They had no idea where I was coming from. And it was, it's taken just a really long time for us to bridge the gap, because there's a certain materialism to psychology that, on the one hand, seems to be a little deterministic, like anybody who has a certain condition should be treated in a certain way, and they should be taking a certain medication, and that should cure them. Like if the word was a proper spell, then I could just wave this word at you and you would get better. But, medicine doesn't succeed that well. It does it, however many... And psychotherapy doesn't succeed that well either. So all of the words that they have in their whole spell book don't necessarily cure us. So at what point then do we have to look at the magician's spell book, or the theologian's spell book, or the philosopher's spell book? Because maybe they have words in there that we need, And then the farther into it you get, the more you realize, wow, the physicists have been stealing words from the metaphysicians for centuries. Metaphysics is the original physics, and when the physicians run out of vocabulary, they go and they run through their metaphysical books looking for, okay, maybe we do have to call it ether, So I'm like super interested in the way that words become reality, and then reality becomes words. And I'm also a practitioner of these arts. I've done readings for years, and to do that you have to translate into your client's way of speaking. You have to translate what you're receiving through whatever media you're using into something that they can hear, because otherwise you're just sitting there throwing off foam. It sounds like interesting on the tape, but if it doesn't hook into the person, then they just gave you all that money and wasted that time for nothing. So I'm especially interested in ways to say really difficult things the cleanest way possible, which may not sound like it as we're talking here. I know I'm spinning long sentences and whatever, but you know, it's been said, and it's true, that if you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it yet. So that's been my work, is to go all the way into all the complication and then see if I can work my way back out again and explain it simply with my clients. And I think I've been pretty successful, and that was why then the Tarot of the Holy Light became like kind of the capstone of a long career of reading cards for people, because this esoteric psychology and spiritual self-cultivation arts, everything I've ever studied seems to apply to the tarot. And then as soon as I get it applied, then there's a client who needs it, just like I just learned it. You know, through my whole lifetime of studies, there's this constant body of synchronicities that as soon as I need that next concept for whoever's about to walk in the door, the book will fall off my shelf into my hand, or suddenly somebody will bring it to me and say, "Have you seen this?" You know, and it's been a life of synchronicities. And so that's when I talk about being madly psychic, sometimes inconveniently so, it's because there seems to be this force that runs ahead of me and arranges things that I know nothing about, or it's attached to me, but it's making sure that things fall in the right order so that you know, I'll get what I need to be ready for the client who's coming, or ready for the person who's about to call me, or whatever. It just goes like this all the time. So I think I'm doing the right thing for who I am, because it carries me along. I don't have to make it happen. It just unfolds if I'm of goodwill and keep going forward saying yes. You know, my job is to say yes, to follow these things up. So anything I've been able to study and research, I've wanted to turn around and pass on to others.
This is so great. Well, we're going to go through each one of these chapters. Of course, these are for the free Patreon subscribers, but we're going to hear a lot more of you for those who subscribe, including your Jung conference that you did at the C.G. Jung Institute on exactly these topics that we're talking about. So thanks so much for going into a little bit more emphasis of Chapter 1 of Foundations.
Thanks you for asking these questions.
Okay.
It's wonderful.
All right, bye.